This is a podcast from the SportsPro Insider Series. Hello and welcome to another entry from the SportsPro Insider Series. I am Owen Connolly. I'm the editor-at-large at SportsPro and host of the podcast. Hope you're well. Very happy to be back with you and delighted to be bringing you more from our virtual event program, which is now well into its second year and still going strong. Pretty extraordinary. The Insider Series launched late in April 2020 with a look at esports and gaming, hot topic back then, if you recall, with live sports events suspended. And that's the topic the team returned to just a few days ago, taking stock of the latest developments in the sector, getting a sense of where the opportunities lie in 2021. And we're going to be bringing you a session looking at the evolution of sponsorship in esports and gaming spaces, considering how digital partnerships and activations are changing and how brands can thrive in the virtual arena. Our panel is going to be closing ground between traditional sports and esports, looking at how to promote effectively and bank a return on investment, breaking barriers for non-endemic brands, and helping us to understand how sponsorship campaigns are received by fans of competitive gaming. Taking all of that on, we had George Mead, the Partnerships Director at Fnatic, and Alex Nunez, Brand Partnerships and Advertising Sales Lead for EA Sports Madden NFL, one of the very biggest sports titles in video games. Asking the questions was Misfits Gaming Group Vice President of Communications Becca Henry, and we will be throwing to her shortly to take us through that session. Before then, a little more information on the Insider Series for those who need it. It is our regular run of virtual interactive events diving deep into a different progressive industry topic every month. If you can join live, you can get your questions answered by some of the leading experts in key sectors and meet and chat with peers via the online platform. Otherwise, every single session to date can be revisited on demand. That's 13 months worth of stuff encompassing everything from diversity and inclusion to sponsorship, tech, broadcast and OTT. You can get it all for free if you register at sportsproinsiderseries.com. I highly recommend you do. Meanwhile, another couple of dates for your diary for a showpiece virtual conference. SportsPro APAC will be taking place on the 7th and 8th of July, reflecting on a tumultuous 18 months and looking ahead to what is to come in the Asia-Pacific region. We've got speakers from Star and Disney India, KO Sports, DAZN, Facebook, Tennis Australia. International Paralympic Committee President Andrew Parsons will be joining us ahead of Tokyo 2020. We've got the ICC, Borussia Dortmund, Chelsea, the AFL, and many more besides as well. SportsProAPAC.com is where you'll find everything you need to know, and you should also be aware of the territory-focused SportsPro APAC series running between now and the start of July. China and India are already in the books. You can catch those sessions on demand. We will be looking at Australia and New Zealand on the 9th of June and Southeast Asia on the 23rd of June. Some valuable content for you there if you're involved in the APAC region or you just want to know more about it. Again, sportsproapac.com to find out more. All right, back to the Insider Series and to sponsorship in esports and gaming. I'm going to leave you in the capable hands of Becca Henry, and I'll speak to you again very soon.
Print, digital, events, podcasts, SportsPro.
Hello, welcome to the last panel of the day. This panel is on sponsorship in focus, where brands are seizing the esports opportunity. I'm Becca Henry from the esports organisation Misfits Gaming Group, and I'm really excited to be joined today by speakers on opposite ends of the esports spectrum. So on one side, we've got Alex Nunez, Partnerships and Advertising Lead at EA Sports Madden, one of the leaders bridging the gap between sports and esports. And on the other end of the spectrum, we've got George Mead, who's the Partnerships Director of Fnatic, probably one of the longest standing esports organizations and arguably one of the most successful teams. So today our discussion will be divided into three main pillars. So the opportunity for brands in esports, the evolution of partnerships in esports, and branding campaigns in esports, how they're treated sort of differently in this space. So if anyone would like to ask questions, please feel free to type them in the chat, and I'll bring them in. I'll bring them into the conversation if they're natural. But we'll also open the floor to general questions at the end. So now, without further ado, I'll hand it over to our speakers for a short introduction. So Alex, starting with you, you're the partnerships lead for EA Sports Madden. Tell us a bit about what you do for the Madden team.
Yeah, thanks, Becca, and hey, everyone. My name is Alex Nunez, and I'm the brand partnerships and in-game advertising lead for Madden NFL, which has been the exclusive home for simulation NFL video games for the past 30 years. As a massive fan of the franchise, I'm proud to represent our commercial partnerships business, developing strategies to bring brands to life in and around our different titles through ways like scalable media and sponsorships in Madden Mobile, AAA co-marketing campaigns, and HD integrations inside of Madden Console, as well as securing corporate sponsorships for our esports division, which is the Madden Championship Series. And you got a taste of what that looks like in that previous video. Quickly touching on the health of the Madden esports business, which I think is relevant for our discussion today. We're excited to share that we're coming off the biggest season in MCS history for brand investment, with the signing of brands like Snickers, Pizza Hut, Campbell's Chunky, Verizon, Oakley, and Gillette, all to annual deals. So very excited to talk about those partnerships a little bit more today and provide my perspective on some important tech topics in esports with George and Becca.
Thank you very much, Alex. And so, George, tell us a little bit about your role at Fnatic. You look after partnerships there. What does that look like? Also, how long have you been with the team, and what did you do before joining Fnatic?
Cool. Hey, Becca. Hey, everybody. So I'm George, Partnership Director at Fnatic. I've been with Fnatic for about 1 year, brand new into the other side of the fence. But the rest of my career has all been on the brand side. So I was 7 years with Becco, managing the global brand and this partnership, in particular with FC Barcelona. Fortunate enough to win some fantastic industry awards with the Eat Like a Pro initiative, including double Euro FE and Sport Industry Gold. Before that, 7 years with LG. So basically, all on the brand side, marketing background, and I'm so super hyped about the space of esports. By no means an expert, but learning from the team every single day, and super happy to be on here to share some of the things that we're doing at Fnatic. My role is to oversee all of our brand partnerships. We have some of the most forward-thinking global brands as a partner of Fnatic. Some of them you would have seen in that little reel just there, and some of them on the apparel. But we've got some amazing partners that we're doing absolutely everything we can, relentlessly trying to give them huge opportunities within the space of esports with Fnatic around the world.
Thank you, George and Alex. So welcome everyone to this panel. So I want to start with our first pillar, which is the opportunity for brands in esports. So that's, in the title, so it's a bit of a giveaway. But I want to really kind of start with some questions that most people are, wondering in this room. So Alex, let me start with you. Is an esports partnership worth it?
Yeah, well, coming in hot right off the top, and let's tee up why we're all here. The short answer for me is absolutely. And there's a laundry list of reasons why, but for me, it's because as a relatively burgeoning sector for marketing advertising, esports has so much uncharted white space for creative and meaningful brand storytelling. The first to market innovative brand partnership headlines that we read about in esports every day are just a reflection of the limitless opportunity that exists in this space compared to more mature traditional sports sponsorship sectors. So selfishly, as a brand marketer, I think we should salivate to be a part of an industry where remarkable, groundbreaking work is the standard. And that's what I love about the sponsorship strategy side of esports. It's the pressure to push boundaries of innovation and create moments in time that are worth talking about. So that opportunity to stand out in the industry while connecting on an emotional level with gaming audiences, for me, makes esports absolutely worth it.
Just kind of vibing off of what Alex said there, do you think that brands really see the ROI in partnerships in esports?
Yeah, no, I think this is a really super important question. And when I first came in, I was asking some of my ex-colleagues from different organizations about their views on esports, and there were some question marks about the return of investment on it. So I thought, okay, that's super interesting. So when I heard that feedback, one of the things I wanted to do is basically debunk that, and basically valued all of the assets of that Fnatic were offering independently with Nielsen. Over 250 assets we valued, and basically compared that to industry benchmark return of investment levels. And the offering was far superior to actually the traditional sort of benchmarks that you normally receive. But of course, media value is only one part of that return of investment. I think the bigger sort of return of investment is brand uplift. Are you really changing perceptions of brand partners? And I think that's the super stuff that esports can really bring. The basis, it's a digital first area, and it should be the most transparent and digital centric space. And that's something that I think absolutely the returns available for brand uplift, digital engagement, as well as the media value. I think it's 3 ticks, to be honest with you. And so many opportunities, and our current partners are benefiting from that. But I think there's more opportunities out there for other brands also to get involved and level it up.
I definitely want to go into this topic a little bit more a bit later when we kind of talk about brand campaigns. But Alex, I want to come back to your to Madden, and it's more closely tied to traditional sports. So do you find that helps with attracting brands more easily, especially in the non-endemic space?
Absolutely. I think that the familiarity that brands have with traditional sports is incredibly helpful in contextualizing the global attention around esports today and the attraction from brands to invest in the space. I can totally understand why there's baseline just confusion around the growth of competitive gaming from afar. But when you take a closer look, it's clear that esports are fueled by the same pillars of entertainment that drive traditional sports fandom. It's watching the best of the best compete at the highest level of a game that you love. It's passion, it's energy, it's competition, it's elation, it's heartbreak. At its core, esports is not dissimilar from traditional sports. And that's why there's not a single pitch meeting where that sizzle that you saw at the top of the intro doesn't run, because it showcases the excitement, the energy, and the passion that's palpable around our space. So for Madden, it's important that we lean into the same emotional pressure points that drive traditional sports fandom to contextualize the reason why Madden has a home in the hearts and minds of fans. And that connection to traditional sports is super helpful in attracting brand sponsors. But at the same time, that connection to traditional sports and that emotion can be told to and attached to more esports IP than just Madden. I think it's consistent across the entire competitive space.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that, and I think I think we are seeing a trend more now that it's almost like traditional sports having an esport is like the gateway into it, and I think especially within the last few years, even in the past year. There's been a massive influx of non-endemic brands working with, anything from leagues to teams, to even, just partnering with influencers in the space. So I think it's we're really seeing an upward trend here. So George, I want to ask you just a bit about your previous experience. So since moving to Fnatic, how has your perception of esports partnerships changed? Did you have an opinion about the value of esports partnerships before you moved to Fnatic, and how would you describe their value now to brands who you're pitching out to, who you're working with, that might be skeptical about the value and about what they might get out of it?
Yeah, no, I think it definitely has, until you kind of live and breathe it every single day. I think you are learning and adapting in this space constantly, and I think the opportunities of brand new, like brand disruption and new assets is incredibly enticing, and the space is evolving constantly, and I think that's super interesting. The gaming community, they let right, every single day, so how they respond to content is something that you get an immediate traction point. I think that's super valuable for us because we have an in-house studio team that are able to bring that content to life, that understands the audience and what's going to basically generate the level of engagement in the most optimal way. And I think brands are seeing that actually you can get some of these great returns and results, not just for the short term that here right now, but also for some of those long-term gains. I see there was a question about the ROI of sponsorship. I think the traditional return of investments that's expected is on that 3-to-1 stage. And what we were offering within Fnatic, for example, is significantly above that. You're looking at 5 to 6 to 1 for some of the main partners of Fnatic. So I wanted to answer that question I saw come up in front of me there as well.
Yeah, George, quickly, I just want to hammer that point one more time because it's so important. Because yes, the pressure and challenge from brands to measure against ROI is incredibly fair when we talk about these investments in a relatively unproven space. But at the same time, it's so important for those brands to be prepared for a creative definition of what return looks like. I'm a firm believer, and you said it perfectly at the start, is that awareness drives perception, and perception can drive desire. And these best-in-class esports partnerships that we're talking about and celebrating today are absolute perception drivers. And these audiences have proven to be incredibly loyal and influenced by perception-driving partnerships. So when we go in and think about return in esports sponsorships, I think brands should, number one, look at what is the best way to win the hearts of the communities, and that return will be received tenfold with that strategy.
I think it's also really important to hammer in the point of, you have to also take in sentiment analysis and tone and, player engagement, like fan engagement as part of that ROI too, because you really, really, really know if something has succeeded in esports, and you really know if something has failed. It can be a tricky space to navigate, but you can instantly see when something has been successful based on where everyone is sharing it. It's all over social media, it's all over news articles, it's all over YouTube, Instagram, everywhere. It is an insane space where it's a highly engaged audience, and everybody is so passionate, and they really, really they take to things with such passion and such energy. So when you have created a campaign that goes really, really well, the instant feedback that you get from that you want to take into that ROI as well is just the sentiment analysis of how engaged all of the fans are. Just kind of bouncing off of that point that I just sort of mentioned there, is, in both of your opinions, and Alex, I might start with you because it might seem a bit less of a barrier to entry. Is there a high barrier to entry for brands looking to get into esports? Is it essential? I think probably about 5 to 10 years ago, or when esports was maybe even 5 years ago, it seemed to be an opinion that lots of brands didn't want to get involved in esports because they thought, I need to hire an expert, otherwise I'm not going to be able to navigate that space well. And I think while that sentiment is true, you do need to work with someone that is an expert in the space. Can that come from a brand, or can that come from a league? Do you need to really staff up and create that additional esports team if you're just looking to just dip your toe in the water?
Yeah, I'm curious to hear George's thoughts here as well. But from my side, it certainly doesn't hurt to have an expert or division dedicated to gaming strategy. As I think you said it perfectly, Becca, as well. It's becoming a bit of a standard. And that's because esports and gaming is a vast space today. It can be difficult to navigate, headlined by the ends of the spectrum that we have represented in the world of esports on this panel. But I think that should be a source of confidence for brands to see the diversity that exists in the space, to find their natural point of entry. So my recommendation for a brand that doesn't have a gaming or esports division, they shouldn't be dissuaded from finding their home. It would be to leverage what research is available to understand where your desired audience is gaming, because they are. Reach out to the publisher and start a conversation. Trust me, we want to have that conversation, and we'll talk a little bit more about why later on in this panel. Because we want to mutually explore what great looks like and merge the best attributes and brand value that you can bring to the table to create a desirable experience for our players and fans that's worth talking about and celebrating.
Yeah, and just to add, I mean, I fully agree that you don't need to have a individual or a team that are experts within esports and gaming, because we've seen case studies from our current partners that they don't have that at this moment in time. So I don't believe it is a mandatory at all. I think it's also a lot easier than what many would perceive. In my opinion, being an expert on what your objectives are and what you're trying to achieve for your brand and business, I think is vastly important, because if you do not have those objectives in place, it's impossible to measure the success of the partnership. So being an expert on understanding where you want that brand to particularly go is absolutely critical. Not being an expert in the gaming, we've got our teams that are experts on understanding brands, understanding agency background, esports expertise, gaming audience expertise. And within that sort of skill set, we can basically build something that will really work according to the brand and business objectives. And I'd also say that what I was also really surprised about the space of esports of coming in is that we at Fnatic were offering like short-term campaigns if someone wanted to kind of see what is the space all about. And if they were a little bit skeptical, we were so confident in the proposition and so confident that the results would be very strong that doing a short-term campaign, we knew that would lead to further opportunities to be able to work with that particular brand. And I'm pleased to say that strategy, which was before my time joining Fnatic, has been super, super successful. That some of our biggest partners today have actually come from that type of setup of that short-term campaign. But these guys don't have experts within esports and gaming, just a very much strong interest in understanding what they want from the brand. And we're able to put that into our in-house studio and create the campaigns that brings those returns. Would you agree with that, Becca?
Yes, I do. And I think just to kind of like add on to that, the really, really, really good point that you made about really having that sort of North Star, that goal that you want to hit in a campaign, because I think that there are oftentimes things don't really succeed when brands understand that they want to get into esports, they understand the value, but they don't really know how, they don't really have a clear path of what they want to achieve. So I think that is really helpful for any organization that you want to partner with, whether it's a league or whether it's a team or an esports brand within the space. I think having that sort of clear understanding of, okay, I want to speak to this audience and I want to tell them this story. That really, really helps to make such a solid campaign, and it really helps to really bring your brand to life within the esports space. So, with that in mind, I sort of want to move on to our next bucket, our next pillar of discussion, which is talking about the evolution of partnerships in esports. So this little bit of background on this theme. I think over the past few years, there's been a massive growth in what teams and what organizations have been able to do as the space has matured, as esports has gotten a lot more investment. There's been lots of leagues have become franchised now. Lots of teams have more financial structure. There's a lot more stability. So there's a lot more that they can do when it comes to branching out and doing partnerships. A lot of teams, a lot of leagues, and even a lot of brands like peripheral companies or anyone in the space, that a lot of them have in-house teams, that creative teams that make content, or they have a very close tie with an agency that is endemic in the space that will treat your brand with the respect that it needs. With that being said, I want to ask Alex, what can you gain from an esports sponsorship that makes it more valuable than a traditional sports sponsorship? So like if a brand was thinking about partnering with an NFL team or with a Madden team, what is the difference there?
Yeah, so I think that traditional sports sponsorships have played a foundational role in paving the path for brands to enter esports and gaming. Traditional sports sponsorships relatively can feel a bit antiquated or even disguised based on the sheer volume and repetition of the playbook that surrounds that space. But I think that's a really cool reflection of how brands have become native to traditional sports themselves. They play integral roles in fueling the collective experience for fans. So, like for example, there's a lot that goes into an NFL game, right? Than more than just what happens between the whistles. That content is often brought to you or sponsored by a brand. It's halftime shows, top plays, stadium rights, in-game stadium branding. It's all part of the show, the entertainment. So when we bring brands in around Madden, they're helping us legitimize our simulation game, which is a pretty powerful role for a brand partner to play for us. So I think there's a big leap from traditional sports to simulation esports, from sponsoring content to authenticating it. And that's a big jump in value. A big example for us, and like probably the North Star of what that looks like in our world, is when we signed Pizza Hut last year to the first ever virtual stadium rights deal in history. It's a simple concept that we may take for granted, but embedded in football culture and traditional sports, but something that we hadn't seen in esports yet. So the announcement of virtual stadium rights was a disruptive industry moment. But most importantly, what I took away from that was it filled a massive legitimacy gap in our commitment to simulation sports experiences and being the most, I'll say it, like for my world, it's okay to say authentic in sports simulation, but authenticating a sports simulation video game with a virtual stadium rights deal was absolutely necessary on our path for growth.
And I think that is something that actually is a major highlight of what's happening in the esports space at the moment. We are seeing it definitely wasn't done a few years ago, but now we are seeing more and more sponsors taking that center stage inside the game as well. So other examples of that, the League of Legends, the Rift, which is the main map Summoners Rift, the main map that they play on. They now have flags where your champions will walk past and the camera screen will pan, showing their sponsors. The Call of Duty League, they recently this season introduced jersey sponsors in the game, which was again a new experience too. So my team, the Florida Mutineers, we have our SoFi logo on our in-game jerseys in the actual game, so you see it when the players are running around. So that's just something that game publishers are becoming a lot more aware of partnership needs, and how partnership sponsors in game really do amplify and they do elevate the game as well, and it just it adds that extra value spot for partners as well. So it's really interesting, and I think that's a trend that's not going to go away. It's definitely going. Would you agree, Alex? You're going to keep
totally
hopefully doing that.
I don't think those things happen without the path that traditional sports played to make it okay for brands to be around a competitive environment. That's probably unheard of in the broader real estate of the game. For general gameplay, you won't see those branded banners inside of a casual head-to-head match. But because it's a competitive viewership product and everyone has some type of affiliation or connection to professional sports in the real world, it doesn't feel unnatural, which is a huge moment to broker for gaming, and that access for brands. It's really special.
Help us spread the word about the SportsPro Podcast. Subscribe, like and share our content on social. Join the conversation on Twitter with the hashtag SportsProPod. And if you're enjoying our work, why not leave us a rating and a nice review on your podcast platform of choice. And if you want to get in touch, you can send us an email, podcast@sportspromedia.com. The SportsPro Podcast. We're listening too.
And so, George, coming from your experience at Beko, who have obviously partnered with lots and lots of different football or soccer teams, depending on where you are in the world, what would you say is the biggest advantage of non-endemic brands working with an esports organization?
Yeah, I mean, just to add to that previous point, and one example is a campaign that we ran with Lavazza in Q4 of last year. Built a in-game branded map within Fortnite that had a branded experience within that game. So you're talking about some of the branding in some of the games now for that gives that level of exposure in game, which I think is going to continue to grow. But building them like an experience within that game that's branded with their product integration within that gameplay is just like off the charts. And I think that's why it's super exciting that the new opportunities for storytelling that basically doesn't disrupt that gameplay. Actually, it's part of the gameplay, I think is fantastic. In terms of course, traditional partnerships provide so many benefits as well. I'm not here to say that traditional partnerships are something of the past. I think they both offer incredible competitive pros and also cons. But for those non-endemics, what I would say is we've got a nice balance of both. And I think there are so many opportunities for those non-endemics that want to bring the brand to life in engaging disruptive ways, that doesn't necessarily need to have a proposition that's geared up towards that audience of today. That audience is also going to be there with long-lasting perceptions, with high purchasing power for tomorrow. And that audience is very, very difficult to reach because of the high percentage of ad block. I think we saw some statistics the other week. It was up to 70% of ad block amongst this audience. And therefore, to reach them, you have to engage with them in disruptive ways. And I think within gaming, I think their opportunities are absolutely there. So what I would say is that for non-endemic brands is to open those conversations with teams, with publishers, with gaming houses. There's plenty of opportunities out there for you. And I think it all starts with opening that conversation.
I think one thing I want to sort of touch upon that we mentioned earlier was there's often this perception that non-endemic brands coming into the esports space just serve to legitimize esports. They lend their sort of brand reputation and their high value, and they make the esports ecosystem better. While I do think that is true, I think more and more now, as you've just sort of mentioned there, George, you are seeing esports audiences and fans. They are a lot harder to connect with. They're a demographic that a lot of endemic brands they can't tap into this Gen Z group or esports fan group without actually, it authentically, right? So you can maybe market to this group, but maybe they won't see it if they have ad block, or maybe they won't even really pay attention. Whereas, if you actually work with an esports team and organization, that's where you can actually really make a campaign that will speak directly to them. So on that sort of point, to the two of you guys, what do you think about this idea that, the esports partnerships are now sort of like, it's not just a one-way street, they're sort of becoming mutually beneficial?
Yeah, Becca, I really try to lean into the point about the legitimacy that brands provide in my world. But from a high level, what I find to be exciting about esports, and maybe even a little scary at the same time, is it's hard to place the ceiling for how high this space can climb. But I am confident that the continued attraction and investment from brands into esports and gaming will be a determining factor in achieving the full growth potential our world has. And I say that because at this stage of the esports life cycle and the swirling attention around the space, it is really important to see sponsor presence. It provides that invaluable validation about how big it is right now and how far we can go. So I do see that as one of the most important sort of value exchange from my side on Madden when a brand comes in to cement the status of the Madden Championship Series. So like when we signed the most sponsors in MCS history this season, or we see Fnatic partner with a brand like Gucci, amazing. That with an activation that's like universally admired, we're seeing why esports partnerships are mutually beneficial. Validation of the space, creating experiences that are otherwise unattainable without the help of brands for our players. And it all collectively ladders back to picking up the space and making it even bigger. And once again, seizing the full growth potential that we all know esports and gaming has.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think the investment that comes into this particular space is so important on the basis it actually levels up the entire ecosystem. the money's coming back into it to widen its reach, to create new assets, new opportunities, to professionalize it through coaching. We've got a performance director with mental health background, physical health background, and this is going to level up the playing field. And I think, that reinvestment into the space is something that also is quite different in this space, what I would say, versus my background within traditional sport.
Yeah, just to pick up on that point, like the reinvestment into the space is more than just financial, right? Like it's a alleviation of historically like gated IP from non-endemic brands and bringing it into this world to an audience that may not be able to interact with it and through traditional mediums. That's super important. And that's more than, once again, the dollars that are being put into this space, but a brand investment into like showcasing that this audience is incredibly valuable to them. That's great from a player and fan perspective.
And that's a great segue into our last segment before we come over to questions with everyone. We want to touch on now and showcase some brand campaigns in esports. So, George, in your opinion and from your experience, how can a non-endemic brand really make an impact in esports?
Yeah, I think it all starts with, as I mentioned, having those clear objectives. What we do is we take those objectives, we then have internal brainstorms with our in-house studio team and also with my team on the partnership side to basically come up with a unique concept that is something that is aligned with the insights of our brand partner, the insights of the fans, and the insights of Fnatic, to find that sweet spot that's going to be able to connect all of this together. We want to make sure that every single brand has that big, unique idea and that concept, which is unique to that particular brand, that enables the fans to engage with and see that consistency and evolve that through its term. We've been so busy working on that over the last couple of years, and I'm pleased to say that we've got some really now good traction, that we've now shown what impact that's creating and how it's evolving over time. And basically for to create that impact from our side is we measure that every single quarter on brand awareness, brand consideration and preference, but also the perception change of the brand over time. We do post-campaign analysis to basically show whether it's working, and if it's not working, we can tweak things and adjust things and progress on that. And that's super helpful because I've spent my career on the brand side, and when you know that what you've created is generating, yes, the engagement, but some of these numbers are telephone numbers, and it's difficult to know whether it actually is really working, right? But I think it's very much on the brand uplift side. Are people more likely to consider me? Are they more likely to buy me? Do they like me a bit more? And I think this is the stuff that's super important, that we're now integrated with our Fnatic Insights proposition. So can create big impact. I think for any brand, we can find a way. And I think because there's so many different assets, there's so many different ways to bring brands to life. Everything from talent, creators, professional gaming, the different gaming titles, the different audiences. And that's something I've learned a lot about, is the different audiences for different games. It can be seen as the difference between football and NFL, the different gaming titles. It's not just esports. Each of these are individual communities with different levels of behaviors. And I think what we need to make sure is that how we address the right gaming title, the right audiences, the right creators, the right influencers to that particular brand after we built that idea. And then we start to see big impact.
Just to quickly hammer home, and what I love what you said there, George, is that it's not one-sided. It's not just up to the brand to understand and learn about the esport. It's equally as important for that exploration, understanding from our side around what the brand is trying to accomplish. And that happens with a clear set of objectives of what they're trying to deliver. And between those sort of experiences and mutual understanding from both sides is where that perfect partnership can emerge and you become closer with one another. This isn't a passive space for brands to work in, right? Like you don't just hand someone the check and it's transactional. No, it's a much deeper investment from the brand to really engage with this passionate audience to extract the full value of sentiment, show up beyond the integration and the placement around the competition to illustrate that you're here for the players and the community. And that will be returned because of how vocal and passionate, enthusiastic, and loyal these audiences are. So that's another point of reinvestment in diverse forms to get the return.
Absolutely, 100% agree. I think partnerships are about mutual benefits, right, for both sides.
Yeah.
And it takes two to tango, and it isn't just a check and walk away. It's more than that. But I think, what's important is that we can do those workshops and understand those objectives. If they're not clear, we can find ways to bring them to life and make them clear, and then find a sweet spot, right? And then what we've found is that through trust and confidence over time, what we've been able to show is that we found the space for the brand to be revitalized amongst this new audience that they didn't previously know how to connect with. And I think that's what's super, super interesting about this space, and one that I've been so impressed, like from joining Fnatic, that I've always felt like it's always on my shoulders, being on the brand side, to be able to crack everything. Actually, we're doing our utmost to help brands actually crack it for them and find a way, because of the people on the Fnatic side have got that strong understanding of the audience, and that's what brands are super interested in, seeing how their brand's going to come to life amongst that audience.
So in the interest of time, I want to just sort of end our panel session before we go on to questions. If anybody does have any questions, please feel free to put them in the questions tab, and we'll get around to those in a couple of minutes. But with all of everything that we've just spoken about, like, I really want to highlight some of the campaigns that you guys have worked on. So Alex, talk us through some of the standout campaigns that you've worked on, and why was it a success?
Yeah, I was going to talk about one, but relevant to the discussion that we were just having around diverse forms of investment into esports and seeing the return on that is what we did with Oakley this past season. So Oakley is an official marketing partner of the NFL, where they're the official on-field shield provider for all NFL games. And we were able to broker a connection and a prospective relationship with them through their OMP status with the NFL. And what I was so excited and proud to see was that Oakley wasn't looking to Madden to market their NFL line or their NFL message. They were looking to Madden to help launch and support this new product line designed specifically for competitive gamers, a sports performance product for competitive gamers. From a brand that is historically been tied to traditional sport for as long as I can remember, to see them invest into the space, not only to just shape their marketing message around our platform and IP, but literally create a line of products to help fuel the growth and competition of esports is something that we were really proud to support through a Madden lens. But the other example I want to talk about showcases the example of how esports can be a powerful tool, not just for the brand, but for the publisher as well. It's what we did with Campbell's Chunky this past season. Madden is a vast franchise. It's bigger than just HD. It's also console and mobile. But those experiences for players at this time are not truly cross-connected at the moment. So when we worked with Chunky, part of that strategy sessions, very similar to what George outlined, was that we set out with the mission to bridge the gap between our product pillars through one cohesive experience where Chunky could shine. And that creative connection point was really led by competitive gaming and esports. At the same time, beyond just having Chunky showcase their keen eye towards gamers, we had this sort of nostalgic homage to Chunky's iconic history of surrounding the NFL. If anyone's a American football fan, that Chunky is synonymous with this famous Mama's Boy campaign with Terrell Owens, Donovan McNabb. But it's a bit antiquated in this moment and where we live, and how the next generation of football fans isn't exclusively consuming football content traditionally through watching games. So with Madden, we were able to, pay our respects to the authentic brand ties that Chunky had to, the sport of football, while introducing Chunky to this next generation of football fans on a medium that they love and is super engaging. And it was the perfect blend of bringing together the various communities between mobile HD and competitive gaming inside of Madden with this like beautiful, vibrant in-game experience that celebrated Chunky's, once again, historical ties to the league and the future of where they're trying to go around this sport. And it was platformed with a culminating moment of an invitational tournament that showcased that beautiful integration inside of HD and mobile. So I think we have a video to roll and showcase what that looked like and how it sort of transcended and bridged the gap between our product pillars.
So we do have a video, but we're slightly running out of time, and we want to.
No worries.
Do you want to head to? But I just want to quickly go over to George to highlight something that you guys worked on, and then we'll open the floor to questions.
Yeah, cool. Just a couple of things to talk about. I think, firstly, with the Gucci collaboration, which was amazing, like done through the team, like Gucci super forward thinking, limited edition Gucci Fanatic dive watch. After Milan sort of fashion week, wanted to bring the sort of Gucci world, into the sort of Fanatic and the gaming world. It was a super premium timepiece. I think it was $1,600 US. But sold out in 48 hours in Europe. It was a limited edition, but that just shows the purchasing power of the audience. And I think for us, it was a great case study because we were able to bring our pro gaming and our creators and brought fans into all of the storytelling around it. And that was one example. And I think the other one is with BMW, we've been able to do bring the BMW world and the Fanatic world, again, merging those two together with When Ultimates Meet. And I'll ping the link into the chat. It's a case study video, but just really shows how you can show the strength of two different brands in two different sectors, find that sort of sweet spot to bring them together. It's created a huge impact of a content series that we had through YouTube and supported with creators and our pro gaming. The engagement and the viewership, all completely native without needing any paid for media, which is always a really good sign that it's working really well. And I think we've just received a nomination for content series of the year, which shows that we're moving into the right direction. But of course, we've got a long way to go. We want to keep pushing ourselves and just trying to find new opportunities and ways to bring our brand partners to life. I will ping the link into the chat and be as kind as you can. And
you got the awesome swag too, George. I know that's what it was all about.
Gucci watch, man. Right, so we're gonna. Yeah,
I need to try and get hold of one myself.
No. All right, so we're going to move into some questions now. I'm going to pull up one on the screen. There we go. That works. So from Denny, do you guys always have an idea for a project with a potential partner, or does the idea evolve in the conversation?
Yeah, really, really good question. We try to make sure that there's always an idea and a concept that we would share with a particular brand, even before any sort of partnership or campaign is agreed. We think it's a super important way to kind of show what they kind of expect to come. Of course, that idea can evolve over time, but as I mentioned, creating that big idea and that concept is really, really important to be able to connect these worlds together. This isn't just a case of slapping your logo into this space and expecting the community and the fans to love you more because you're kind of in there. It doesn't work like that. It needs to be, what are you bringing into that space and how you're going to generate that engagement? So there's always an idea, 100%, and then it's basically working together in partnership and evolving that idea sometimes over time. But we always see that idea and how it can be extended beyond its original term. So it's always going to have that forward thinking and long-term approach. Hopefully that's my answer to that question.
From a Madden perspective, I mean, there are certain big ideas that can transcend a traditional brand brief of objectives and what you're trying to do, headlined by virtual stadium rights and being the first. There's a ton of value in that. That once again can transcend what you're looking to accomplish or what you're hoping to do. It's just so big. But from our perspective, it's like George, we want to come to the table with a very malleable concept and present it in a vulnerable way where this is white space for us within our game, within our competition, that we feel your brand could breathe life into, because we're missing it, and you're going to fill that hole with your story in a relevant way. That's what our audience are commanding and looking for.
On to the next question. So PK is asking, as custodians trying to monetize every possible revenue from brands, what is your strategy to leverage a sizable percentage of the brand budget to esports marketing as against conventional media like TV? How do you justify the ROI and in-event experiential implementation?
Yeah, great question. I think, if you look at the spend into media, which is obviously advertising of a normal advertising message, the difference is, I would say, is that this isn't about advertising, let's say, corporate commercial messages to the audience. So I think there's a different, completely sort of different space between media buying on commercial advertising to how to bring your brand to life to the community, because of the differences in the audiences. The reason that we found that from a lot of fans in the space of why they've got into gaming and esports in particular is because they get tired of seeing advertising left, right, and center in other spaces, and therefore that's why they want to sort of shut that off. So therefore, it's not about just pushing that, say, commercial advertising into that space to generate some additional areas of spend, move from one to the other. I would say is it's more about that brand uplift rather than eyeballs and impressions and reach. Of course, media and spend is critical behind that, but the salience towards the brand needs content and storytelling and engagement. And that is what I think is important to kind of show the benefits of how you can change perception of your brand amongst a new audience that you previously couldn't connect with. That's what I think is super important here. But Alex, would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think at the top I said, what I love about the value in esports is the opportunity to paint new canvases and tell stories that didn't exist before. It's underdeveloped. It's ripe for opportunity to be a pioneer, and not just in a like a disruptive way for the sake of disruption. It's thoughtful, it's interactive, it's immersive, and the reception from a brand who can come in and like assume that potential is received so well on the other side. And maybe it's not the critical mass of programmatic advertising, but you're actually like winning the hearts of a concentrated community that are incredibly loyal and can be influenced by brand perception and will follow your brand if you come in the right way. So I think that's just where those dollars work harder.
Yeah, I think A/B testing, I think, is something interesting here to look at the impact of, let's say, a paid media campaign versus doing something in this space and then tracking the differences and what that brings. But of course, the intangible value of being associated with a partner is sometimes quite difficult to quantify what that is. But yeah, what we've done is got independent, all of our assets valued, because those conversations do get off benchmarked in other spaces. So I think for us, we want to make sure that it's robust, it's clear. So we do share all of those types of metrics that get independently valued. So
next question, which is one that I feel very strongly about. The Misfits Gaming, we have offices based in Europe and in the US, so it is often a challenge. But with esports having a large global audience, how would regional brands benefit in this space? It's definitely a really tough space to navigate, but I definitely think that the way that esports teams are structured now, there is generally a solution to find the best solution for your brand in that regional capacity. So George, with Fnatic being all over, really how do you guys tackle it?
Yeah, I think traditional sports are actually a little bit ahead than esports in this particular space due to the fans and the cluster of the understanding of where fans are, etc., around the world, and how the media and the distribution network is. Within esports, as I mentioned earlier, each gaming title has a different audience, and that audience sometimes is a different demographic, and sometimes they're based in different key countries for each of those games. So based on that, actually what I would say is that when a brand has got a particular region in mind, what is important there is to match that particular game and audience and creators that have the right levels of fans and followership according to those key markets. And what we do is we basically make sure that we then identify those games, identify the creators, link towards that brand, and then basically can collaborate, but we still offer that sort of exclusivity at this moment in time for that particular category on a global basis. So rather than having, let's say, 2 or 3 partners of the same type of ilk, that is our normal sort of way of working, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, from a Madden perspective, we're in a very fortunate position where our audience is almost 100% North American, US, and it zeroes in on a 18 to 34-year-old male. But there are opportunities to localize that presence through our connection to the NFL and specifically to NFL teams, because that is, almost as differing in your team sports fandom as you are in a different country, essentially. So the relationships that we have at a local level with those teams, developing content around the esports athletes who are representing those NFL teams, and creating something that's relevant for that geographic area in the country is incredibly powerful, and once again shows how thoughtful you are in crafting that content around esports.
The SportsPro podcast is published by SportsPro Media. The producer is Ed Dixon.